I have a dream.
It's one small step for man.
I am the greatest.
You want something, go get it. Period.
Going to school in Philadelphia, I was already starting to feel that there was a wider world than what I had conceived of in Wichita. I was always the person who wanted to meet new people at any cost, so I think it really goes back to this idea that we lack the ability to understand what someone else is going through because no one asks. And so now that I'm aware of who I am and what value I bring to any scenario, I can now bring that value to my platform, which is TableTalk.
What's up, my fellow dreamers, doers, achievers? This is episode number 22 of the Dream Big & Co. podcast, and the guest for this powerful episode is Sophie Beren. We recorded this podcast in the great New York City, so completely new location, but underlying theme and at the heart of it is the same goal. Talk about life, the journey, the process, many other things, the successes, the failures, the lessons that were learned along the way, and most importantly, extract it all for the greater good of the world for you guys. As for this conversation, the way it progresses, you'll really see that Sophie develops as a person, which in turn allows TableTalk, her organization, to develop as well. And they're really tapping in to a larger picture here in that giving young adults in their communities a sense of empathy, a sense of understanding. And one thing to note within this conversation is Sophie touches on the changes that are being made with TableTalk, and from the name to some of the logos or the content they're doing or the projects they're working on. It's always going to be a work in progress. Nothing should stay stagnant. It should always be changing, evolving, and growing, and that's what TableTalk is doing. So as for them, they continue to do that, and most importantly, they are expanding on their vision of bringing the world closer together and making connection and conversation of understanding, open-mindedness, and empathy commonplace. They are breaking all types of barriers in religion, race, ethnicity, and many other things, and it's beautiful to see the work they are doing with chapters all across the country. It's truly becoming a movement. And if you would like to join in, I'll highlight at the end, but there's links to check out all they're doing. But to move forward, to keep it relevant and analogous, the quote for today's episode is Mohsin Hamid when he said, "Empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself." Empathy is about finding echoes of another person in yourself. And as for our sponsor, it is more of a shout out for this episode. I want to highlight TableTalk, which is, like I said, what you'll learn is Sophie's organization. And like I mentioned, and like Sophie says within the episode, she wants to bring the world closer together and make it feel smaller. And to open up chapters within communities around the world, they're allowing conversations and talks, literally, figuratively, around the table to open up and expand people's knowledge. And they're developing the emotional intelligence of young people within their communities to be able to grow their communities, grow themselves, grow other people, and develop their relationships. It's a beautiful thing, and I don't want to prolong the episode by my continual talking, so please listen in, take notes if you need to, if you want to, and here we go, episode number 22 with Sophie Beren of TableTalk. Finally, we're here.
So excited.
So awesome to sit down with you finally. It's crazy. We met, like half a year ago? Yeah,
Next
6
Gen
months ago.
Philadelphia.
Yeah. So it's awesome to have you here now. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
Really excited.
But just to start off, just to expand people's awareness so they get to know you and just so I can get to know more of you, because there's a lot of, gaps missing with like my knowledge of where you're at. But like, talk about like where you grew up, and then where this like bubbly, smiley, like happy, sincere person came from. Was it family, friends, like things that caused your trajectory to go this path?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's dive in. Thank you for saying that, by the way.
Of course.
That I'm a happy, smiley person. So I'm Sophie. I'm originally from Wichita, Kansas. Most people haven't heard of Wichita, nor have ever traveled there, but born and bred Kansan. And I spent my whole life growing up in a very wholesome environment. And I, quite frankly, always felt like I was the outsider. I grew up as the only Jewish student in my grade of about 70 kids. And at one point, I was the only Jewish student in my high school. And growing up in Wichita allowed me to feel left out of a lot of things because I wasn't like all of my friends. They all reflected different religious backgrounds, but also cultural backgrounds. And I couldn't understand why I had to be different. So I spent my whole upbringing kind of feeling like being Jewish was a bad thing. Even though my family believed really strongly in practicing Judaism, I just didn't have a connection point. All of my cousins were, for the most part, older than me, so I didn't really have that connection with other Jewish kids my age. So the minute it came time for college application season, I was running out the door, and I really wanted to go somewhere on a coast to really give myself a larger worldview. So I ended up applying to Penn, and I got in, and I'm so grateful for that. And by, going to school in Philadelphia, I was already starting to feel that there was a wider world than what I had conceived of in Wichita. And so I think my upbringing of being the odd one out in most scenarios allowed me to want to find a bigger pond. And through finding that bigger pond in Philly, I was able to start connecting with people who were like me. I rushed to join every club under the sun, but for the most part, all of the activities that I joined were student clubs that reflected Jewish activities.
You still felt like constrained in a way with that? I
was actually trying to fight that. I wanted to join every Jewish club to feel more a part of it, because I never had that at home. So I joined the Jewish a cappella group, and I was on Penn Hillel board, which is like the Jewish student union on campus. And a couple of months later, I started realizing that I was spending all of my time with people who were like me. And something felt weird about that because I had spent my whole upbringing surrounded by so many people from different backgrounds in Wichita. So there came a point where I had this realization that I should be spending more time getting to know different types of people, because you should be in college to explore others' beliefs and backgrounds to better affirm your own. And I really took for granted what I had in Wichita. So that's kind of where the first realization came about, that I needed to do something to fix that. There
was something I read recently. It was like, you can only appreciate one thing if you like are fully immersed in the other. Like, you need both to like balance out the scale in a way. So you find, and I can like really say for myself, like being in Philly really widened my perspective. Like, there's so many people of so many backgrounds, but it's a matter of putting yourself out there and like finding that courage to do so.
Totally. And just crossing that threshold is really the tricky part, to really just reach out and meet someone new.
So how are getting into like, we can get into TableTalk in a sec, but how did you like go outside that threshold and like basically go outside your comfort zone in a way?
So anyone who I knew at Penn could probably attest to this, but I was always the person who wanted to meet new people at any cost. So whether I was standing in line at the dining hall, I was always talking to the people in front of and behind me in line. I was always trying to sit with new people in new spaces and reach out to people who I had heard of or a friend of a friend, just to start making those connections. Just because I was this wide-eyed Kansas girl who really just wanted to get the most out of my college experience. So for me, it was just starting with something simple or finding a point of connection to start a conversation, whether it was talking about something around us or something that was going on on campus, I just always tried to start with something simple to just engage with someone next to me. And so I kind of developed this ability to do that without feeling uncomfortable. And so I would always just reach out and talk to new people. So that was kind of my technique, is no matter where I was, I thought of it as an opportunity to make a new friend or relate with someone on a new level. And hopefully through that, other people started doing the same thing. So if I was getting lunch with someone and I met someone in line, I would invite that person to sit with us, and just try to also form connections between the people I already knew to hopefully make the world feel a little smaller.
Yeah, and that's your whole goal, right? To make the world feel smaller, yeah. I was reading something in a book, and it was like, it's so simple, but it hit me in like a weird angle that it caused me to reflect myself. And it was like, each person you're next to throughout your day has this like abundance and like plethora of knowledge that you don't know about. Like maybe they're really good at like a particular thing or like subject or industry, and they can like fully indulge and tell you about that. So it's just, there's so much out there. You just got to put yourself out there.
And everyone has a unique story. And I think the part that a lot of us struggle with these days is going forward, trying to uncover those things that we don't see on the surface. So every person comes to the table with their own experiences, but oftentimes we cast off those people because we don't want to take the next step and actually say hello or getting to know them. But you never know. Maybe they love the same Netflix show as you, or they know the same person, or they're taking the same class with you on campus. And so I think the fundamental difference between just acknowledging that everyone has their unique story is actually acting on it and trying to figure out for yourself what that person brings to the table. Yeah. And it's always a fun game for me to always say hello, because you never know what's going to happen. Yeah,
it's a new adventure every time.
For sure.
But in going through all that, now we'll like put ourselves in the shoes of like where you were in that time in your life. What caused you, like, where did TableTalk, where did the name come from? Because I saw the font is similar to Friends in a way, isn't it? One of my favorite shows, but can you talk about that? Yeah.
Of course. So that's actually one of our new sweatshirts. We're launching our new store today with a lot of good merch for all of our leaders. So feel free to check it out.
Check that out. We'll put that in the footnotes, the website.
But going back in time, the name and the platform TableTalk actually originated from one of my best friends from camp. He is a year older than me, and again, he was one of my closest friends that kind of represented Judaism in a way for me, because I never really had friends from home who were young and Jewish and represented that it was cool and fun to be Jewish. So my really good friend Ami started the basic premise of what TableTalk was on Emory's campus, came up with the name, the logo, and the basic idea of bringing people together who would not otherwise meet. So we were sitting together in LA over a winter break of my sophomore year, and he told me about this, and at first I gave in to the stereotype of not thinking it was necessary. I was like, why does this need to exist? I'm comfortable in my circles, I'm comfortable with my friends. And after some self-reflection, I really realized that there was a beautiful opportunity to bring this to my campus as the next chapter, but rework it to really fit my campus culture. And so I ended up starting it that January of sophomore year with his guidance of the general ideas and practices, but then has since evolved into something entirely different. And that's where the name came from, of just being able to come to the table and what the table signifies in terms of breaking bread and making connections with people, whether it's at the dinner table or, you know, a table in any other space you would encounter in a coffee shop. So that's kind of where the name originated.
That's awesome. That's true. That's amazing. And what was the hustle and bustle like in the beginning? Because I'm sure you had to, you know, I know how it is, especially just like word of mouth, getting it out there, like showing people the passion and vision behind it, you know?
The hustle and bustle was real. I don't think I've ever sent more emails in my life.
Perfected the art of the cold email.
Oh my gosh. From the months of December to March of that year of 2015, I think I sent upwards of 500 emails, simply reaching out to every student leader on campus. I reached out to every president of every club, every teacher I knew, every friend of a friend, just sending them a basic email saying, hey, I'm Sophie. I believe that this will change the face of Penn's campus. I can only do this with your help. Are you in? Do you want to grab coffee? And I made everyone feel like they were a part of the solution. And if I just sat down with one leader of a different organization, they would be able to tell the people in their clubs and start spreading the word as it kind of amounted over the course of those months. So I was constantly either meeting someone for coffee, cramming a school assignment, or sending more emails. Just trying to develop what the foundation would look like on campus. And then I started recruiting some people who I felt would be really good to be on my team. Started having some meetings, planning our first events. And then it all kind of amounted to this first event that we hosted in the spring. So I made sure that throughout the hustle and bustle, there was an action item. There was a call to action. Come to our first event, see what it's about, come experience this, sit on a couch with me. And we launched our first event in the spring. But I did everything I could to reach out to as many people as possible, but also selfishly getting to meet so many cool people along the way. Like, these are leaders that I would have never encountered because of the way campus culture works. Everyone is self-segregated with groups of people who are like themselves. And of course, that's a generalization, but for the most part, everyone finds their friend groups or their sports teams or their Greek life organizations or their a cappella groups, you know, from the second they step on campus, everyone's anxious for community. But there isn't anything out there to kind of stir the pot to catalyze this interaction series. So I just wanted to find ways also for me to get to meet these amazing people on campus that I was feeling a void for having not met them yet.
That's like one of the reasons. In a way, it's kind of selfish, but also unselfish, because I'm selfish, like having this platform to be able to talk to people like you and other people, but on the same token, being able to release this so other people can find value in it.
Totally.
But then going back to that, what we were talking about, so you had this dream and vision, started taking action item, and the ball is starting to roll. But throughout the process, what is one like major failure? Because you only learn the most from failures, so you can take it with you, change it going forward. So what was one massive failure that really helped in shaping TableTalk?
There were a lot of roadblocks along the way. I would say one that really stands out is once we started kind of feeling what was working on campus, we started coming up with some new ideas. One of our team members, who eventually became my co-president, Jeremy Wilson, came up with this genius idea to start hosting events about specific topics. And we were going to call it TableTalk Tuesdays. They were going to be held in a different dining hall every week. We created this partnership with Penn Dining. They were so supportive. But what ended up happening is the first event we held, we thought it was going to be a huge success. So many people were going to come. We were finally providing a space for people to share their opinions in a constructive way, maybe with people who thought entirely differently on a particular issue. So what we did is we spread the word primarily through social media, and eventually got a couple of signups. And the first event was about the Penn culture, such a low barrier entry topic, talking about what it is, why does it exist, and we held it in one of the biggest dining halls on campus. But what ended up happening is we only had about 7 people come to the event. And on top of that, we had about 5 people from our team. So the people who came were really just the friends of the people on our team. So that was the aha moment where we realized that we weren't creating unique opportunities to connect with new people. We were just opening up a space for our existing friends to come together. And after that event, I remember our team feeling so down about the fact that only a couple people showed up. And it led eventually to an amazing realization that transformed the course of what TableTalk is today. But that failure was really tough because we thought this new idea, this vehicle for connection, was going to reach the entire Penn population. But the first event only attracted 7 people. And that was a real eye-opening moment for us, that we must be doing something wrong, and we got to reinvent the wheel a little bit.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. But especially with like everything, talking about Penn's culture, like in episode 19, meeting with, Jared Fenton, creating Reflect because of what he saw at Penn, and then just talking about like meeting with Rob, episode number 16 on the podcast, like he's trying to talk to 10,000 people for an hour each, like develop more human connection. Why do you think there's been this surge in not only like the mental wellness side, but just human connection and getting to know people's stories and all of that? It's really interesting.
It is really interesting, and it drives all the work that we're doing. I mean, Rob and Jared are awesome. Love the work that they're doing. I think there's finally this realization that's sweeping at least the millennial mindset that we all exist in echo chambers, both on and offline. We self-select. There's all of this interesting academia in the communications field around how birds of a feather flock together. We end up surrounding ourselves with people we build trust with who actually reflect our racial, religious backgrounds on a variety of different levels. And I think recently, with the advent of technology in our hyper-connected world, we're starting to see it a little more. We're starting to understand that what we share reverberates in this echo chamber of people that you have friended or followed that reflect your ideologies. So I think now that we're starting to see it in crazy world-shifting moments, whether it be the election or a current event or a terrorist attack or something that happens in the world, when we see people sharing about it, we're starting to understand that we are only seeing a self-selected number of posts and voices because we're not expanding our own social circles. So I think it's becoming more important because we're finally coming to this self-realization that we need to be talking as much as we are speaking.
Yeah.
We're doing a lot of speaking on social media, but we're not actually in conversation with people. We're just sharing our thoughts to a group of existing thought leaders, essentially. So I'm hoping that, this trend that's picking up and this momentum will actually carry in to a larger realization where people will actually start crossing that threshold and realizing that at some point we've got to take advantage of this for ourselves. We have to make that move and start shifting our current ecosystems. Yeah,
using our advantage. 100%. Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to say. Yeah, like social media, you would think like the hyperconnectivity, like it's crossing barriers, is doing all these things, like there's so many people you can meet, but as much as you think it would be like a deep connection, it's actually a surface level connection for the most part if you make it that way. So it's just a matter of like switching that mindset and that mold.
100%. And I think that in some weird way, what we're also doing is we're presenting ourselves in a certain way as well. So even though we believe we're being hyper connected, we're only giving people a certain portion of ourselves too. So it can be superficial, but it goes both ways because the connections we're making are also made through a certain self-presentation. So I think that's also fascinating when it comes to connection and conversation. Yeah. It's kind of crazy these days.
And the one thing that I've been heavily focusing on, and I'm sure you have a lot of it, and a lot of people are talking about it, is empathy. And not only seeing it on social media and maybe seeing people post things that only show like a 1% like minority of their life, but also seeing in real life, like realizing that people are actually masking something they don't want people to know, or they're insecure on a deeper level. So it's just like you're talking about, just going a step deeper to know that person, to have the empathy to realize that there's a void that's within themselves.
Totally.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing about empathy is it's almost like a muscle. You've just got to energize it and strengthen it and unlock it. And it's something that people can learn, but are really struggling with right now because we don't know how to put ourselves in someone else's shoes. So a lot of the work that we're doing is trying to find really unique ways to unlock that empathy, because on a really higher order level, unlocking empathy will lead to solving some of the world's largest problems. And it seems so simple, but so many people lack it. So this is what we're really, really trying to address right now. And I think the only way we can address it is through our own experiences and what we learn from who we've encountered. Like, for example, my freshman year of college was really my first moment when I really got hit in the face with the lack of empathy that surrounded me. I would say it also seeped into an experience I had senior year of high school. I had a friend both my senior year of high school and my freshman year of college take their own lives. And it was one of those situations where, of course, everyone is so shocked. We only hear about suicide in the media, on TV shows. I mean, I had only heard of suicide on Glee. It felt so far away growing up. And what was really crazy to me is that no one really understood what was going on with these two individuals behind what they were putting out to the world, either at school, in class, on social. And that was the first time when it really hit me that you have no clue what someone's going through until you ask. Yeah. And how can we get more people to ask? How can we build that system that becomes commonplace, where people want to be asking and want to be thinking of what someone else is experiencing in any given moment? Because it was crazy to me that, you know, those two individuals were so incredibly wonderful, but really were only putting out one side of themselves to the people they met and the people they interacted with on a day-to-day basis. And no one really thought to ask what was going on behind the scenes, because we see them so happy in their extracurriculars and on social media. And it created this movement where now people, after hearing about one of these suicides, really started investigating the motivations behind it. But it's not a perfect science. I think it all goes back to empathy. Yeah. It's not through, you know, trying to understand someone's text messages or, you know, the way they were interacting with their peers. I think it really goes back to this idea that we lack the ability to understand what someone else is going through because no one asks. Yeah. So I'm curious to hear what you think. I mean, we're trying to solve this. How do we build empathy?
It's just like, I feel like in a way, like subtly reflection and like these little things like reflection, journaling, I do yoga and meditation, they help. But I think it just derives from the way my parents raised me. And for me, it's just so liberating to have empathy, to realize like if someone hurts me, I feel like bad for them in a way, because maybe it stems from a deeper problem. Maybe their parents were mean to them when they were growing up. So just asking better questions and being curious in a way has developed my empathy. But I think that's just the $1 million question, like how can people develop more empathy? Is really,
finding ways to ignite that spark of curiosity is what we should be thinking about. Yeah. Like, how can we actually take this concept and bring it to students or young adults in a digestible, snackable way to really create that change? How do we get people asking those types of questions? How do we get students not only just learning beside their peers in a classroom, but knowing who their peers are and what they come from and how they were raised? I think would really lead to so much understanding. So I'm just such a believer in that.
Like we were talking about before we started recording, like a lot of schooling is developing someone's IQ and just like these technical skills, but why not focus heavily on developing the EQ, like the emotional intelligence, because that goes farther than most things. And relating it back to TableTalk, you guys are doing just that. Like you're focusing more on the emotional intelligence side. And would you want to talk about what you mentioned, if you're allowed to, about your future ambitions with what you guys want to do with the courses and all that?
Totally. Yeah. And it relates to what you were just saying. I was having a conversation with my sister a couple of weeks ago, kind of asking ourselves this fundamental question of, why do schools only prepare us for the workforce, but they don't prepare us to be good people? Like, why is there not an element of our education that really fuses the practical learning with the social and emotional learning to actually equip us to navigate the world and to navigate society? So that's our basic premise that we're operating under. And now we're trying to close that gap so that we're supplementing what students are experiencing inside the classroom with a way to learn outside of the classroom about the people and the experiences and the barriers that are existing. So currently, TableTalk is now taking this new direction, essentially evolving out of what we're already doing into becoming this company that actually brings people together to make the world feel smaller. And we've identified that, you know, our biggest challenge right now is facing ignorance. How do we break down these concrete walls that are built up between us? And how do we switch that mindset of actually equipping young adults with the awareness and the knowledge and the education to actually reach out and connect with someone new? So what we're doing now is TableTalk's vision and TableTalk's purpose is to celebrate every young adult's unique voice. By doing so, we are going to bring people together to make the world feel smaller. So we've identified that one of the largest issues facing young adults today and the world is that we are stuck in these echo chambers. We're hiding behind our screens. We're interacting every day with the same network of thought. And we want to break open that echo chamber. And we're going to do that through building a content company. We are going to reverse the cycle of ignorance by actually giving the knowledge, the awareness, and the education to close the ignorance gap so that people will start to break outside of their echo chambers. So we are now developing a leadership training certification course that will,
awesome.
So excited about it, to really train young adults on how to talk, how to have conversations, and how to navigate these difficult situations. And through the training program, we're also developing this content hub that will drive resources from every expert in the field on a particular topic. So this will primarily be videos, but guiding questions, data, statistics, definitions on any given topic so that we can bring the experts to the table, no pun intended, to really give young adults the easy access point to learning what they don't know. Because we find that so many people lack empathy and lack understanding and in place have ignorance because they don't have the proper education. We don't know enough. And so we want to foster that environment of learning more and wanting to learn about the people around us every day by creating this leadership opportunity for students to become a certified conversationalist while also giving them the ability to subscribe to our content to learn more about any given subject. And then once a student goes through our course, they can now go out into the world, whether it's on a college campus, a high school campus, in a religious community, through a youth group, on a sports team, anywhere, you name it, have a conversation about any given topic. This leadership training is going to be timeless so that a student really has the resources to now go forth, pick the agenda, pick the topic, and start having more meaningful interactions.
I'm so happy and excited to see you guys taking that new path and like realizing that's where you need to go. That's amazing stuff. I'm excited to see where it goes and the value it provides for, you know, a lot of young adults.
Thank you. And before you continue, I have to give a huge shout out to Rich Keller, who I met through Next Gen, who really gave me the clarity of understanding my value as a person, which led me to re-evolving what TableTalk is and what it stands for. He really gave me the clarity to understand where I'm going. And he specializes in working with young entrepreneurs. So
that's always what it goes back to.
Totally. So I owe a lot of it to Rich as well. I'm really grateful.
And one of the things you said, I don't know, spark went off in my head in a way, but for developing empathy, I feel like you need an abundance of self-awareness. Because if you're not aware of your mishaps or wrongdoing, you can't correct it. So I think it kind of, in a way, starts with that awareness. So it's good that you're going to be educating and bringing knowledge to those kids so they're aware of where they can go and how they can develop their empathy and other, you know, core values.
Totally. And that's kind of where the light bulb goes off, right? Like, the more we create those environments, the more self-aware young adults will become because they're going to start understanding their own beliefs, their own conceptions of the world through the exploration of others. And what we're trying to do at TableTalk is create ways for students to hear other viewpoints and see other perspectives while acknowledging that they don't have to change their own.
Yeah.
We're only asking that students understand another conception of the world, and through navigating that new conception, in turn you become more self-aware, but maybe that's the turning point to become more knowledgeable or to break down your own preconceived notions.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that through creating these environments led by students, really the people who possess the power to change this culture, we're hoping that we're going to get more people following through to that realm of understanding, which is really where we're headed.
Yeah, that's fabulous. I commend you for that and what you're doing, what TableTalk is doing. But then, closing this out in a way and detaching from that, I want to ask you, what is one little realization you've had recently or like mantra that you've seen inside yourself and are implementing into your life?
So, I would say that my most recent realization came about when I was sitting in a room with a bunch of high school deans at a school in New York, and I was pitching to them the service of TableTalk. I was asking them to pay for my services to bring this to their campus, and I got a lot of pushback. They were asking me, what value are you giving our students? What are you actually giving them to navigate these conversations? And I was really struggling in that moment to provide them with an XYZ formula of the value that we were adding at that moment. And that realization led me to go seek out the value that my company is adding to the world, because I didn't have that established. And I am such a believer in establishing the foundation of your idea before going forward.
100%.
The analogy that I've heard recently is, why would you build the outside of the house before building the inside? And so that realization of sitting in that room with those teachers, it gave me the clarity that my idea is not perfect. There's so much left to grow on. And the thing I needed to do next was to understand my personal value that I bring to the world. So my mantra most recently that I discovered through Rich Keller's one-word workbook was that at my core, I am a unifier. All of my experiences throughout my life and my childhood with TableTalk, with everything else I've done, has kind of amounted to the fact that I have this desire to bring people together in all that I do without even knowing it. I've been a unifier all along. And through understanding the value that I add to any given circle as a unifier is something that I never knew until a couple of months ago. And so now that I'm aware of who I am and what value I bring to any scenario, I can now bring that value to my platform, which is TableTalk. If I had learned that my value was something entirely different, then TableTalk would not be the right line of work for me. But through understanding and clarifying my value, it reinforced and re-empowered me to move forward with TableTalk in this whole new direction. So I'm really excited about that. And it really took having that moment in that boardroom with the deans to realize that I need to do a little bit more work, and that's totally okay, because I want to solve this problem, and I believe so strongly in breaking open the echo chambers in our world that I need to make sure that I'm addressing it in the most high impact way. And so that was really the revelation a couple of months ago that led me to where I am now.
That's powerful. That's really amazing.
Crazy.
Yeah. And in a way, you're kind of like living out the one quote where it's like, the purpose of life is to find your gift, or something like that, and then the rest of your life you have to give it away or something. Like you found that thing that drives you, and then you're fueling the thing that is just you're thinking about all the time. TableTalk, your own company, to go out and do that thing. And
it was crazy because it was always there. I didn't even realize this, but through going through this exercise, it brought me back to when I was younger, and I used to tell everyone around me that when I grew up, I wanted to be the first woman president. Ask anyone who knew me. I was randomly at a New Year's brunch, and a woman who I had never remembered came up to me and said, "Sophie, I remember when you were younger, you told me that you wanted to be the first woman president, and people knew me as that growing up. And now, X amount of years later, having gone through this exercise and my value coming out as Unifier goes back to that basic idea that what do presidents do? They unite the people.
Yeah.
They bring people together to
That's
create
crazy,
change.
yeah.
And I just think that everyone should go forward knowing their value, because that totally transformed the direction I'm headed in. And it was something that was there all along. So it's just a matter of unlocking it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. And I would love to end it just there because that is very powerful stuff. But one way in which we end each episode is I want to ask you, what is your big dream while you're living on this earth? Or it can be personal, table talk, for the world. What is a big dream for that?
So my overarching dream is to make the world feel smaller. I think if every single person took it upon themselves to meet someone new, to challenge their own preconceived notions, and really understand the perspective of another person, we would be living in a world that is unified and not divided. And I think it goes back to this simple notion of crossing that threshold of reaching out to meet someone who reflects a different background. But one day, I hope that TableTalk will not need to exist because we will have unlocked empathy to the point where echo chambers aren't commonplace and human connection across the spectrum is.
Yeah. You want to do so well that your organization doesn't need to exist. And I think the one last pillar to make the world a better place is the empathy that you mentioned. And I'm sure you heard of the story, the analogy of the woman throwing the seashells back in the ocean, where, for the people that don't know, a woman is throwing one seashell at a time back into the ocean, just laboring over that and just arduous, going up the beach, and there's just like trillions of seashells. And a man sees her doing this after like 10, 20 minutes, approaches her and says, what are you doing? And she's like, oh, I'm saving the seashells or whatever they were. And he was like, that's not going to save all of them. There's no point. You're wasting your time. And she picks up another one. She looks at the man and she's like, it'll save this one's life. And she throws it back into the ocean. So with what you're doing, it starts with just one person at a time and breaking open their barriers, unlocking their potential, and developing their empathy to create this, magnetic radiating effect for the entire world. So I think you guys are doing just that, and it's awesome to see where you're at, where you're going with Table Talk, and I'm excited for everything to develop.
Thank you for saying that. I totally agree. I know of that as the starfish story.
Yeah.
But I love
That
it.
seashell.
I totally believe in what you're saying because I think oftentimes entrepreneurs get so caught up in the larger impact of what we're doing. But to the core, if we could change one person's perspective, I think we've changed the whole game. And the environments that we create, whether it's meeting someone new on a couch, coming to a table to talk about a substantive topic, or coming up with a whole new way to bring people together, if one person leaves that event having a different conception of the world or connecting with someone they would have never connected with otherwise, that's when we know we've succeeded.
Yeah.
So I hope that we can continue to create those moments that, though on a large scale we're trying to unlock empathy for all, we're really doing it on a small level to change the minds of young adults to take it into the future.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll put all the social media in the footnotes. Please go to the footnotes and follow Sophie, follow Table Talk, and check out everything they're doing. I'm sure you're as happy and value given from this episode as I am. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I hope that everyone keeps dreaming big.
That is right. Dream big. And that is Sophie Beren, the powerhouse of a voice, the person bringing the world together, making Table Talk what it is, the Unifier connector and main driver behind this beautiful organization. And if you like this episode, loved what Sophie had to say, you can check out more of what she's doing, what TableTalk is within the sources and links in the footnotes. And as for Dream Big & Co. itself, to become more connected, to stay more involved, you can subscribe to this podcast, and you can follow us on any of the social media platforms that you use at Dream Big & Co. And most importantly, at the end of the day, your feedback, support, and transparency allows us to expand and grow on our vision. So please continue to give that to us. It means more than you think. And last but not least, continue to crush your day, week, month, and we'll see you next week.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.